Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. And now your host, George Roberts.
Welcome back, entrepreneur. Today we have Jeff Greenberg, founder and CEO of Synergetic Investment Group. Jeff has done multifamily acquisitions for over 13 years, and he is currently running a diversified, customizable equity fund. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. Well, great to see you again. I think the first time we met was on Brian Briscoe's podcast, and that was back when I was an aspiring investor. I just had 14 units. And it was really cool to meet you. Give you a really quick introduction there. Anything you want to add on?
No, just I call myself a recovering syndicator. That now I have one property that will be selling off shortly, and I'm concentrating on getting into good quality deals, quality sponsors, and bringing my investors along with me.
All right, outstanding. I love it. Well, I guess that's the dream anyway, right? I mean, a lot of us, we start out, we get to the syndicator stage and it feels like the promised land, but really, I guess retirement, or at least maybe taking things a notch down, being able to answer calls in the jacuzzi, et cetera, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. No, and the thing is, I sold a bunch of properties and I had my funds that I had to invest. And I figured that I have to do my own due diligence on all these deals and all these deal sponsors anyway. Why not bring other people along with me and help them get into good quality deals? And so that's why I set up the funds.
So it sounds like you've taken a lot of your winnings off the table, so to speak, and now you're investing passively alongside your limited partners as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we all talk about time freedom, and by coming in as a passive investor, I'm able to get that as well, that I can bring other people in, invest my money alongside of every single deal, and enjoy my life, enjoy the time that I've been working so hard to get.
Awesome. Well, since we are talking a little bit about passive investing, I know that you have a pretty famous story about how you used passive experience to get a foot in the door with multifamily. Can you tell us that story?
Passive experience.
Getting like way back there. I swear, wasn't it your first big multifamily deal, or maybe it was a portfolio? And they were, as I understand, they were quite impressed that you had invested in a large portfolio as a passive investor.
Got it. It's early in the morning for me. Yes. That was back in 2010, our first property, which was a 20-unit property. So the first property that I ever bought, other than my own single-family residence, was a 20-unit property that was syndicated. And as you stated, that the lender, which was a small bank, was very impressed that I was a passive investor in a 700-unit deal. And I think a lot of us may start out that way, is getting in as a passive investor, starting in as a passive investor in large deals. And that did impress the lender. And even though we clearly told them that we were only passive investors, the lender was still very impressed with us and our education as well. We were just learning, but that got us into that deal.
Yeah, I mean, huge lesson. Be professional, make the most of your experience, and don't count out that passive experience. And yes, it is a pretty old story. I understand that was going back about a dozen years. I got that from the Bigger Pockets podcast, which, I mean, that episode is so old. That was before Brandon grew his trademark beard. It was still short.
And Josh was still there too.
Yes, yeah. Awesome. So I understand you actually scored that as your first podcast, which now, I mean, looking back, I mean, look at Bigger Pockets. That's the place to be. That's huge, and not a likely first venue. But what was the story behind scoring that as your first podcast?
Well, I had just participated quite a bit on their blogs or their forums. I had gotten some education on syndication. And so anytime I heard comments about multifamily acquisitions or syndications, I came in there, at least from my educational end of it, is put my input in. People would talk about syndicating deals. They would talk about doing deals with other people. And I put a lot of time and effort into explaining things. And that's where I bumped into Brian Burke, which is a very well-known syndicator as well. And we would go back and forth with our comments. And the Bigger Pockets group saw me and all my participation, and they decided they wanted to talk to me.
Yeah, I love it. Find your niche. That's the lesson I draw from that. So pretty cool. You found a place that, big as it is now. Wow, they didn't have a lot of syndicators. I feel like it's still a lot of single family stuff there, but I do see a lot of multifamily stuff too. I see a lot of Joe Fairless there. I just saw him out when I was looking through there. I should probably go back to Bigger Pockets and spend a little time there. It's really developed a lot. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, as far as on the, I didn't realize that there's a lot of people that I know now that I didn't realize that they were corresponding back then as well, or maybe not all the way back to where I was, but a lot of people I go and say, oh, look, there's some communications from these other people, and I didn't know who they were. I mean, 𝐗𝐶 is one, and now I'm investing with him. And there's some other people that I bumped into. I mean, I'm in an investment with Brandon right now, but it's amazing how many people back then were just kind of starting out like I was. And now a lot of them are doing very well.
Yeah, love it. Well, yeah, 12 years on, and I was wondering if you could mention 𝐗𝐶. I mean, he's one of my favorite single family turned multifamily investors. Read a couple of his books, really good guy.
He paired up with Ashley Wilson, who was my asset manager on my Amarillo property, and got lots of stories about that. But she was just awesome. And now I have already invested in 3 investments with her. She's running hers with 𝐗𝐶. They've teamed up. And so I've brought my fund into several of their investments.
Cool. Yeah, well, I feel like we should probably dig maybe a little deeper into that. I mean, I think it's a pretty cool model. The fund model is pretty amazing. There's a lot of benefits to it, but maybe I should just let you speak to that. So what are some of the benefits in investing in a fund as opposed to going into an individual syndication?
Well, first of all, let me explain a little bit about some of the differences in some of the funds. First of all, you'll have a fund that is run by a deal sponsor, and all of the deals within that fund are their deals. So they're running all the deals. They may do a fund just so it's easier for them to get money when they need it. So they have the money readily available so they can go and jump into the deal, makes them more agile. Now, then there's funds where people will say, okay, I'm going to invest in this criteria. I'm gonna, 100 plus units in the South and, whatever region. And they will put all kinds of deals within that fund that meet that criteria. Okay, now in both of those types, you're in the deal. You're in every deal. You're with the one where it's done by one deal sponsor, you're not really diversified. You may be diversified over properties, but you're still working with the one sponsor. Now, the other one, you may be diversified across many different sponsors. You may be diversified across many different markets, but typically you're not diversified across deal types, because pretty much they're going to specify what the deal type. Now, the fund that I have, the diversified customizable fund, the advantage to it is you can get into a fund and be in all different asset types, such as you could do multifamily, student housing, short-term rentals, self-storage. We may get into build to rent. Now, a lot of people may say, well, I don't like this asset type and I don't like that asset type. Maybe I do like this asset type. And that's the customizable part, where within my fund, you get to pick and choose. You only need to be in whatever asset type or whatever deal you happen to like. If I bring in, assisted living, you may say, well, I don't really want to deal with old people. They don't have to be.
What do you mean, Jeff? Old guys rule.
What's that? Old people are cool.
Old guys rule.
There you go. You got it. Yeah, I had to, I had to get my hair ready this morning. I had to, anyway, so that's the advantage of that. Now, there's also disadvantages to each one where, you know, on the one, if it's a fund of all one sponsor, you know, you're relying on them, you're not really diversified. If it's a fund where you've got multiple sponsors in, you know, you may still be in the same asset type, and that kind of, you know, narrows your focus. But I like the idea that investors get to pick and choose their own, so they're diversifying themselves, and that's one of the things I like about my fund. Now, one of the disadvantages is if your money is committed into a particular deal, okay, now you like another deal, yes, you have to bring in additional money. So your $100,000 that you put in is not going to be spread across all the deals unless you put, you know, 50 in one and 50 in another. I mean, that's fine. Once that's allocated, then you have to put more money in. So that's the thing is with the deals. Now, one of the nice things is you only get one K1. You know, out of this, you could get one K1 out of the fund. You've got one portal, much easier to work with. And the thing is you're depending a lot on me as the fund manager to go out and find deals for you and find operators and do the due diligence on operators, which a lot of new investors that want to be passive investors don't know how to do and don't do proper due diligence. I think very few of my investors over the years ever did very thorough due diligence on me. They liked me, they trusted me, they invested with me. I don't think they ever read the PPM. I don't think they read the operating agreement,
right?
But they trusted me. And that can be dangerous, you know, that if you don't know what you're looking for. So that's kind of the high level on the funds.
Yeah, well, I love it. Diversified, customizable, those are great things. But I know some people that have been in the game for a while, probably what might have struck them the most was the single K1. I gotta love that. If you've been in alternative assets for a while, getting a single K1 is a pretty cool thing. Yeah, I get a stack.
And also another diversification is we're looking to find some deals that are higher in cash flow and some deals that are higher in equity appreciation. So if you're a cash flow person that really looking mainly at cash flow and not as concerned about the back end, you know, we're looking to get into some of those deals. And others, it would be the opposite. We're looking to find deals that we may not get very much cash flow, but we're going to get a higher appreciation.
Yeah, all good things, because as you know, if you want to be good at something, you got to stay in your lane. But as you're doing due diligence on multiple sponsors, that's not quite the same thing as lining up the deals yourself. You can certainly afford to juggle more balls as the leader of a fund than you would if you were going out there and finding the deals yourself and having to run the assisted living and having to run the self-storage and the multifamily.
Absolutely. So I'm looking for experts in their area. And the thing is when I was doing acquisitions, you know, we would look at 100 to 200 deals in order to make offers on maybe 30 or 40 of them. And out of the 30 or 40, maybe we're investing final in 5 or 10, and then maybe we get one. Well, I get to look at deals that somebody's already done that. They've already got themselves whittled down to that one. And now all I have to do is look at that one deal. I mean, first I have to look at the deal sponsor, but once I have a deal sponsor that I appreciate, that I trust, all I have to do is look at that one deal, look it over, see if I like their assumptions, see if I like their downside protection, and then from there get into that deal. I mean, like when working with Ashley and Jay, I don't have to look at them anymore. I just look at their deals real quickly because I trust them. You know, so it makes life real easy on that.
Yeah, great model. I mean, it's great to have, as you mentioned, it's like a funnel, right? I mean, there are so many deals that don't make it to the point of syndication. The syndication deals that you see, you get to sift through a lot of them. And it's great to be able to look at things that have already been vetted and passed a certain number of hurdles. So I think that's super cool. Well, if somebody wanted to work with you, say as a sponsor, what sort of things might you be looking for?
Well, I'm looking for, first of all, I want to see their experience. I want to see their business model as far as, if they've been working with their partners for a while, or if it's just a quick hookup with different partners. Everybody's jumped together to work together. I want to know their integrity. I want to hear from different people that have invested with them. What's their communication style? What have they done when there was a difficult situation? How do they communicate? Do they disappear, or do they step up their communication if there's issues? Right now, I'm very cautious on track record, mainly because everybody's done so well in the last 10 years that even, making all the mistakes in the world, you could still come out and give people a 30% return on, 30% annualized return or something, or 40%, because the market has been so good. But one of the things, rather than just the sale price and the returns, is I'd like to see how they did on revenue growth, as far as increasing their revenue streams. What did they do? What did they do to decrease their expenses? How did they get to that wonderful number? And it wasn't just a compressed cap rate that got them that, those great returns. But I want to know about their business. I want to meet them. I'll usually, go out to see them, maybe go to their office. I want to see some of the properties that they've been running. I want to know about them. Mainly I want to dig into their business.
That's great. And a lot of the things you mentioned, these are things that passive investors could do themselves. As you said, they don't usually do these things, but some of these things are really outside the scope, like flying out to meet the sponsor. Unless you're dealing with people that are local, you probably don't get to meet the sponsor. And I think that's really amazing. And another thing that I find really great in your answer is just separating out the tailwinds from the quality of the captain. So are we just doing well because the wind is blowing nicely, or was it the set of the sail? Was it how the captain steered the ship?
I like your analogy.
Yeah, well.
Absolutely. You get you get a bunch of yachts out there, the exact same yacht, and you get the captain, and the crew. That can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Well, I have spent a lot of time out on Lake Erie, so that's where I like to steer my ship. But it's a small one, not a great big sailing yacht yet. So I do a few more deals. We'll talk about that later.
There you go. Yeah.
Next time we meet.
Let me know when you got that. I'd love to do. I did some sailing, out in the ocean, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, exciting. Wow. I like Lake Erie. You're never really outside of the sight of land, but that's not to say it's safe. Of course, it is our stormiest, most volatile lake of the Great Lakes. It's so shallow, right? The waves just whip up really fast, but still, yeah.
So it comes down to the captain, right?
That's right. That's right. Yes, you got to know what to do, and like to do some blue water sailing sometime. That would be really exciting. Well, let's see. I know some of the things that you've done in the past. One of the things that I would certainly consider you to be one of the prime experts in is student housing. A lot of people look at that like, oh, I'm not going to do this. It's crazy. These people are going to wreck my place. But I gather that's not your experience.
No, I've had some good experiences with student housing. You have to be real careful with it because you've got some ups and downs, but you do budget more for repairs and maintenance, but not so much from the students damaging it, more for turnover, because each year you may have different people, and it depends. I've had 3 different student housing, and in one of them we had very little turnover, for the 3 years that they were with us. Usually we don't have them for their freshman year, but I've had others where they have a lot more in the way of options. So my property that was in Oxford, Ohio, there was just a lot of other options. So we had probably about 70% change, every year, where they would find another house closer to the school or with their friends or whatever. But the biggest thing was turnover. But the real key to student housing is management. Management, it's a whole different game, that your management needs to do a lot of things that regular property management companies wouldn't do. Go to on-campus events, and have a booth on campus, and, be talking to students, and a lot more on social media, and, a lot of other things that you wouldn't do. Or we had, on one property, we had a tenant, not just screening, but roommate matching. where they would interview the students. They would give them a document to fill out and try to match who was going to be in the same unit as somebody else to see if they're compatible. Because you got 4 people, say, living in a same unit that don't know each other. You know, one's a slob and one's a neat freak, or one studies all night and the other one wants to party all night. You know, that could cause all kinds of problems. But as far as damages, we had silly damages, you know, silly things that we charged back to them and took it out of their deposit. You know, bottle caps and shot glasses in the garbage disposal, a door kicked down because they forgot their key, a door punched in because the couple had gotten into a fight and the boyfriend wanted to talk, you know, the girlfriend said, no, go away. Things like that. I'm trying to think. We had somebody decided to do their project out on our deck and was spray painting some project and didn't bother to put down anything to protect the deck from the paint. Things like that 99% of them came out of their deposit. And so we were reimbursed from their deposits.
Yeah, good. So sounds like not too crazy in the student housing realm, but maybe I could get some crazy stories out of you in general. Do you have any general crazy property management, crazy tenant stories?
Well, the one that comes to mind was in Houston, where my property manager calls me up and tells me, says, oh, one of our tenants kicked down another unit's door and punched one of our tenants. And I said, oh, okay, how's the tenant that got punched? She said, oh, he's okay. And he says, how's the tenant that did the punching? Oh, he's in jail. And I said, okay, how's the door? Door's being replaced. And I said, thank you very much. And she said, oh, and we've served an eviction notice on the girlfriend of the guy that did the punch. So that was done. You know, I mean, that's where you got, when you have good management, you know, very helpful. There was also one, this was before we had the property, and this was when we were walking the property, and we knocked, I was walking with the owner, we knock on the door, and the guy says, ownership, we need to come and inspect. And the girl inside, you could hear a dog barking. And she says, okay, hang on a second. And we're waiting and waiting, and the barking stopped, and we're sitting there thinking, what's she doing? Killing the dog? We couldn't figure out why it was taking so long. And then when we finally get we're walking in there, and I, you know, distinct smell, a mixture of air freshener and marijuana. You could just tell. I mean, I'm sitting there, I don't think he recognized the smell, but I did. The air freshener just wasn't doing its job.
Well, now you have had student housing, so I think you definitely recognize the smell.
Yeah, well, this was before then. This was a long time ago. But the thing was, is she was running around spraying this entire house with this stuff and thought she was going to hide something. And she did have a pit bull. She put him in a cage. But yeah, you know, she thought she was, you know, putting one over on us. But that's just a couple of stories.
Yeah, why is it that the tenants that try and hide a pet, seems like it's never a goldfish or a gerbil or a chihuahua? It's usually a pit bull, some aggressive breed.
Yeah, I mean, she obviously wasn't trying to hide it. I mean, it was in a cage, but she put it in the cage. But it was more of the weed smoking, I think, that she was more concerned about.
Right. Got it. Now that it seems like it's spread all over the country, but never mind. I digress. Here's another thing that.
Well, let me just say, back on the student housing one, when we did the inspection on my Georgia property, I'm surprised that myself and the other people that were doing the inspection didn't come out buzzing, because when we were walking through that property with the student housing, everybody, it seemed like, was smoking. And we came out and we're just sitting there floating away as we came out of the building. And this was during our due diligence inspection of the units. But that building was just, I mean, they were taking down the smoke detectors so they were able to smoke in their units, because otherwise they were setting off the smoke detectors.
I don't understand the appeal of that. But yeah, it happens. A certain class of buildings, it seems that you're going to have an issue with that.
Yeah.
No matter that you write it in the lease, no illegal activity, no smoking in the units. Well, here's another one that a lot of people stay away from. People say LoopNet, oh yeah, that's where deals go to die. But I think you've got at least one good deal out of LoopNet.
Yeah, I did. My Ohio property, and it was a 19-year-old college intern that found the property, but he refused to tell me where he found it until after we closed. And I couldn't figure out why he wouldn't tell me, but I said, whatever. But he had found it on LoopNet. Now, the thing is there were 3 other buyers that had failed to close on this property before I got it. And so the owners were already pretty well beat up. And this was a student housing, but they were pretty well beat up, and they had dropped the price. So the price that I got it at was much lower than what they were in with. And these were some great sellers that just were ready to move on. Now, I did have problems getting it closed. And actually, I talked about this on a Joe Fairless episode, because the lenders couldn't figure out what to do. That it didn't fit into my square peg didn't fit into their round hole. And so I went through about 5 different lenders before I finally found one that would do that project. But
because it was student housing, or because of some other?
Well, they all knew it was student housing, but it wasn't an apartment. It was 8 different properties. 7 of them were contiguous, which means they were either next door or across the street, but one was a half a mile away. Okay, so that was one problem. Another problem was the syndication model. They didn't understand that a 30% ownership had 100% of the control, which is a typical syndication model. They just didn't understand it. Another one didn't like the idea that nobody on the team lived in Ohio. So they didn't like that. Trying to remember what any of the others were, but that was at least 3 of the reasons that they decided that they weren't going to do it. But this was a combination of it was 2 single families, a duplex, 4 triplexes, and a 12-unit studio apartment property. And so it was, but we treated it obviously, as a 28 units property.
Cool. And here's another one that a lot of people wouldn't touch. Wonder, what would you do, say, if you had the opportunity to buy a condo building and you're not the majority owner in the HOA, but all of the rest of the owners, they are landlords. So it's not like you're just buying one building where everyone else is owner occupied. Is that something you would stay away from?
Well, I certainly would stay away from any condo complex that I wasn't a majority owner if it was regular owners. I've never really given the thought that if everybody else was managers or whatever. So that's an interesting thing I really hadn't thought of. But certainly if it was all individual owners that were living there and I wasn't the majority, I wouldn't want to do that. I almost did one where I was the majority owner, where I controlled the management, the HOA. But that's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one.
Cool. Just curious. I mean, I ask some of these questions for selfish reasons.
Sure. No. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It depends. I mean, if everybody was not owner occupied, you're all kind of in the same boat, which is, it doesn't give you really an advantage, even if you have more than if you had more than anybody else, then you would have more votes than anybody else, unless they all ganged up against you or something.
Yeah.
And that would be possibly less likely than owners teaming up together against your vote. That might be more of a problem. I mean, we're actually in one with Ashley that it's 152 units and we own 150 of them. So we're trying to buy those 2 units at this point.
Yeah, pretty decent majority there. Well,
yeah, that's definitely.
So obviously you're out looking for deals all the time for your investment group, your fund. How has the recent higher rate environment influenced the sort of deals you're looking for?
Well, it influences my requirements. First of all, as I said before, I need to know the operators, and for the most part, the operators that I'm working with right now, I've known for 3 to 5 years. So I'm very slow about taking on new deal sponsors. I'm very cautious about that. But right now, one of the first things I go and I ask them is, how are you protecting the downside? What are you doing to protect the downside? The debt situation is bad. I know people that have bought rate caps and they're looking at the future rate cap that they're escrowing for, say, year 4 and 5. Maybe they got a rate cap for year up to year 3. And some of these lenders are just asking crazy amounts in escrow. I know one that went from $9,000 a month. This is an escrow for year 4 and 5. She was paying $9,000 a month, or escrowing $9,000 a month, and they wanted to take that up to $55,000 a month. Escrowing for future rate caps. That's certainly going to kill your cash flow. So right now, I don't think I would get into a deal unless it was a fixed rate. I want to know what kind of reserves they're going to have on hand. I want to know what the break-even occupancy is going to be for that property. I want to know, first of all, how are you protecting my investment? And then after that, then I'm willing to look at what kind of profit you're going to make for me. Because, if things go bad, I'm not going to get any profit, but I don't want to lose my money. I've never lost investors' money, and I will keep that record. I would rather not get into deals if I don't feel that the downside is being properly protected. And a lot of that comes down to what kind of debt. Oh, the other thing that I didn't mention is loan to value. I don't want to see a high leverage deal. I'm looking at maybe a 65% leverage. I know somebody that's very well known. She's doing a deal right now that's 50% leverage. I'm not sure how she's getting the numbers to work, but at least that's a protected loan. If you're 50% leverage, that's much safer than if you were up at an 80% loan or something.
Right. And all of this is on top of you already asking questions like, what have you done in a difficult situation, which is a great question. I think that's usually one of the first questions I like to ask a syndicator. But between having reserves, which I believe you also mentioned, and having lower leverage, what do you think is most important? Or would you say, hey, I want both?
What was that? Lower reserve? Or
having more reserves, cash on hand, higher working capital.
Yeah, that's certainly important, but the debt is the part that's going to hang you. I've got a property right now I'm selling. I've had for about 6 years. We own it outright. So I've got no leverage on it. So I can sit this market out. My investors would love to get out of the deal, sell off. But right now we have no debt. So we could wait as long as we need to.
Yeah, amazing how the situation has shifted. We had low and stable rates for such a long time where it just seems to make sense to take on debt, or at least fixed debt. And now, wow, just look at that. Everybody who wanted to refinance, everybody who needs to refinance could be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, that's why right now, I would go for a higher rate if it's fixed. Those that have variable rates, it's unsure. And like I said, I know people that have bought rate caps, and others, I know someone else that didn't buy a rate cap. And, both of them have situations that, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, we went from rate cap being something rather conservative to do to now the only real conservative way to go is they have fixed debt, or as you said, have some reserves and have lower leverage. So world is changing day by day.
Yeah, and a part of the disadvantage of the fixed rate is, yes, you're going to have a higher rate, and yes, you probably have a prepayment penalty down the road. Well, the nice thing about the prepayment penalty is if you've really added the value that you've been hoping for, you probably could afford to pay that prepayment penalty. If you put that into your numbers, you need to plan for that prepayment penalty, either, whatever, 5 years down the road. I don't see us leaving our deals in 2 to 5 years, or 2, 3, 4 years like we've been doing. I've done one deal, we held on to it for 3 years. That was supposed to be a 5-year deal, but we got way above what we had planned in 3. So why not leave? and we paid a prepayment penalty. I was in another deal. We had planned for 2.5 years, or excuse me, we planned for a 5-year deal, and we sold in 2.5 years because we got such a phenomenal opportunity. That's not going to be happening now. People are going to be definitely hanging on for longer. It could be a 5-year deal. It could be a 7-year deal. So people need to plan on being in these deals longer. I think it's going to be much longer horizon in order for investors to get their value out of it. And
That's totally true.
You need the debt that will be with you.
Love it. Love all those answers. And one from a time frame where a lot of people were selling their deals super fast. I know one of my first syndications as a passive investor, we got out of that within a year. And now we're going towards the world where it looks like we're going to be hanging on. So amazing just how quickly things can change. But looks like we're going to have to end this thing shortly. So I would like to ask you, are you ready to step up to the firing line?
Sure. Let's go.
All right. Firing line. So these are the questions I ask every time, and just want to add a little pizzazz there. So we're going to start a new segment. So tell us something about one of your real estate markets that most people wouldn't know.
Most people wouldn't know Amarillo. That's where I was in. That doesn't mean I would go back there, but I was in Amarillo, Texas. Oh, and Oxford, Ohio, too.
What would make that market special? Why was it a good deal? Or even just something interesting about Amarillo?
Well, the interesting thing about Amarillo was we were able to buy a property at a cap rate that was reasonable. Everybody was, Dallas was, at 4 caps, and I think we were able to buy at a 5 or something. And we, I think maybe we bought it. Did we buy it at a 6 and sell it at a 5? Something like that. It was an opportunity, but it would take a lot longer to explain my feelings about small markets, but there's advantages and disadvantages.
Fair enough, but definitely some advantages, particularly in these compressed cap rates that we're experiencing now. Yeah. Tell us some advice that you would give your younger self.
My younger self, start earlier. Get buy more earlier. I didn't get into this business until I was my mid 50s. So definitely I'd say, get into the business, learn the business a lot earlier.
What is the best real estate advice you've ever heard?
The best advice that I've heard, or that I also give, is to find somebody that is doing what you want to do and find a way to be of service to them, how to help them out, how to be around smarter, more experienced people than yourself and learn from them.
Okay, so real estate's also a place where we have a lot of dodgy advice going around. What's the worst real estate advice you've ever heard?
The worst real estate advice? Just to jump in with all your money and, put all your money onto deals. I personally don't like the idea of investing in small properties such as single family homes, duplexes, far away from where you live. Typically the profit on those is very small. If anything goes wrong, you could be at risk. So I know people that have been successful doing that, but I don't like that advice. I don't like doing that.
All right, cool. Let's take a nod to the randomness of the universe. And I have a set of random question cards. Just tell me when to stop cutting the deck. And this is going to be something crazy. It's going to be off the wall.
Okay, stop.
All right. Whoa. Are you mentally or physically tougher?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one, because I would say physically now, because I bike every other day. I put in about 27, 28 miles every other day, and I'm in pretty good shape.
Love it.
Yeah. Mentally, I have to work on. I have to work on motivation.
Name a book that's helped to forge you as a leader and as an entrepreneur, and why?
A leader and an entrepreneur. Well, I mean, of course, we all saw Rich Dad Poor Dad, which got me on my path. But the E-Myth I found was very important. It helped me think about how I can systematize things and better run my business.
Love it. I got another recommendation for the ebook this week from Kenton, and I'm definitely going to check that out. I just ordered that from Audible. So yes, actually, I got a later book in the series. This is the E-Myth Real Estate Investor, I believe.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
Yep.
I've got that on Audible as well.
Yeah, awesome. All right. How has a failure or misstep set you up for later success?
Well, just making mistakes on property. I mean, not doing the quality of deal due diligence has made me very cautious and wanting to find out, what's going on in a property. I want to ask the deal sponsor, what kind of due diligence they've done, because, especially on the Amarillo deal, there were quite a few things that we missed, as well as the inspectors missed. I guess the real one would be is not to totally trust inspectors, to really do a lot of due diligence on the inspectors and make sure they do a quality job, because there were things that I was really surprised the inspectors missed on the due diligence.
Wow, great one. Yeah, inspectors can be good or bad. Can you send us out with a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs?
Well, I always tell people you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone, that you don't grow in your comfort zone. You don't start growing until you're uncomfortable. So do things that are uncomfortable, and eventually those will be comfortable, and then you move on to the next. And then you push yourself again out of your comfort zone as far as learning new things, whatever it may be, new experiences. That's when you start really growing.
All right, excellent. And just one last question. I want to make sure that our listeners and viewers can reach out to you. So if you want to invest with Jeff Greenberg, learn from Jeff Greenberg, reach out to Jeff Greenberg, what is the best way to do that?
Well, you can reach me at jeff@synergetic.com, synergetic.com. You can go to my website with the same address, Synergetic IG. And also, I have some questions that you could ask deal sponsors. I have a little ebook at sigcre.com/sponsor. And you could read about some questions and things that you need to ask deal sponsors before you get into a deal.
Excellent. And I want to thank you so much for taking your time to share your knowledge and expertise and experience with our listeners. Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you very much. This was great. I enjoyed it.
My pleasure.